Hi guys, this is your lesson on symmetry and space. Your due now for today is to answer the question, what is symmetry? So I want you to take a moment, pause your video, and in your journal write down what you think symmetry is. Hopefully this is a term that you are already familiar with, and it will be kind of a review for you. Our goal for this unit, we are going to be looking at mandalas as our project, but our goal is I can use the elements of line and space effectively in the positive and negative space of an artwork to create a more interesting artwork. We're going to write down our vocabulary in our journals so that we can take notes so we know what everything is. Our first word is positive space, then we have negative space, symmetry, asymmetry, and mandala. The first thing we're going to go over is what is positive and negative space, and we're going to watch a video about that, and then we'll go ahead and talk about and look at some examples of that in art.
Space is always part of an artwork, sometimes in multiple ways. No art form demonstrates this more than site-specific work. Site-specific art is designed exclusively for one particular space. For this type of art, it's impossible to isolate the work from its surrounding environment. So for many artists then, space and how to transform it is the artwork. Space is one of the 7 elements of art, along with line, shape, form, texture, value, and color. Space is the area in which an artwork is organized. It encompasses the area within a work of art and can also include the area immediately outside of and around a work of art. In paintings, drawings, and other two-dimensional work, the space of an artwork is usually contained within the borders of the paper or canvas it's made on. The main objects in a work of art take up positive space. The area around them then is called negative space. Sometimes artists intentionally try to blur the boundaries between positive and negative space. In sculpture and other three-dimensional arts, positive space is the area the objects actually occupy, and negative space is all the other areas between and around the objects. Many two-dimensional works create the illusion of three-dimensional space by using some very specific techniques. Notice how painter Kehinde Wiley overlaps some of the background pattern onto the front of people in these portraits. This overlapping gives a sense of three-dimensional space. Landscape painter Wang Hui placed objects in different parts of the canvas to imply three-dimensional space. Notice how figures towards the top of the paintings seem to be moving further back in space, even though they are roughly the same size. Some artists do use relative size to give their work the illusion of real space. The smaller human figures in these paintings by Ben Shahn seem to be more distant and further away from the larger ones. Roy de Carava often contrasted sharply focused figures with blurry, soft backgrounds in his photographs. Such a contrast in detail gives the sense of lush, real depth. Varying hues and values will also give two-dimensional works the illusion of real space. See how painter Georgia O'Keeffe uses a variety of red values and imbues her work with a feeling of true depth? Painter Alex Roulette uses classic single and two-point perspective in his work to create the impression of deep, expansive space. Notice too how objects get smaller in order to seem more distant from each other. Some other ways to describe how artists use space are dense, open, cluttered, symmetrical, shallow, flat. How How would you describe the way artists approach space in these works? What qualities do you see? How artists use space is one way they are able to create a unique style and reinforce the messages they hope to communicate. The next time you're looking at a painting, photograph, or sculpture, try to notice how the artist is using space in their work. And when you're making your own artwork, try to develop an approach to space that resonates with other ideas you're trying to communicate. That way, your messages will surely travel far and wide.
All right, so we're going to look at some examples. First of all, what is positive space? Positive space is the subject of your artwork, so whatever your picture is about. If it's a person, then the positive space is a person. If it's, for example, the picture that you're looking at here, these objects would be your positive space. It's whatever your artwork is about, and the negative space is all that empty space that's around it. So that you can see this a little bit easier, this image shows all of the detail taken out. So you can see that in this example, the positive space would be the white and the negative space would be the black. Here's another example. This is like a roller coaster kind of looking thing. And you can see that the positive space is going to be this roller coaster kind of object. The negative space would be all of the sky that you can see in the background. And again, I took out the detail so that you could see the positive space in this example is the black and the negative is the white. So how you use space in an artwork is also going to make a big impact on your art. In this example, you can see that the positive space, the tree and the land, is not taking up much of the space, and it makes it not that interesting. If I decide to change the space more and make the positive space take up more of my image, it's going to make my artwork more interesting. So same image, more of the positive space is being used by the tree. This is about 50-50 of positive space versus negative space. Let's do the same image again and make the positive space the majority of the space in this artwork. So you can see that just by changing the same image but changing the use of space is going to create a whole different artwork. Now you're going to be looking at some art and you're going to be answering some questions. And of course this is also geared toward the classroom. So when it says talk to your table partner, obviously you're not talking to your table partner if you're at home. But you're going to ask yourselves these questions as you look through the artworks. You're going to identify the positive space and the negative space. And then you're going to think about how did the artist use the space in their artwork? Did they use more positive or negative? And how did their use of space impact the artwork? As you're moving through these and asking yourself these questions, make sure that you're pausing the video so you have time to think them over. You don't need to submit them. This is just you thinking about the artwork and how the artist is using space. Again, make sure that you're pausing so you can ask yourself these questions and take a moment to look them over. I'm going to go ahead and click through them. Just make sure you're pausing so that you have time to look at them. Now that you've finished looking through those artworks, hopefully you paused and thought about the questions that it was asking as you worked your way through, we're going to look at symmetry versus asymmetry. First of all, here is the definition for symmetry. There are two kinds. The first kind is called bilateral. It means two halves that are exactly the same. You could slice them down the middle and they would be the same on either half. This is a great example of bilateral symmetry. If I drew a line right here through the owl's face, and kind of folded it in half there, he would be the same on each side. That is bilateral symmetry. The other kind of symmetry is called radial, and it's when something is exactly the same all the way around on its axis. An axis, if you think of like the Earth, how it spins on its axis, same kind of idea. If this was to spin around, it would be the same no matter which way you spin it. This is an example of radial symmetry. Asymmetry is when two sides of something are different, so there is no symmetry within the work that you're looking at. We're going to go ahead and click through a few of them, and I want you to think to yourself if they are bilateral symmetry, radial symmetry, or asymmetry. Here we go. What do you think this one is? Thinking in your head, is it bilateral, radial, or asymmetry? This would be a great example of radial symmetry. How about this one? Bilateral, radial, or asymmetry? Now this one has some slight differences, but it's pretty close to being a bilateral symmetry. If you cut it down the middle, the two sides are almost exactly the same. Bilateral, radial, or asymmetry? This is a great example of asymmetry. No matter where you cut the plane of the artwork, you're never going to see the exact same or very similar things on either side. So this does not have symmetry. Bilateral, radial, or asymmetry? This is a great example of radial symmetry. If I cut it in half, I'm going to see the same image on either side. So these are the words that we went over. We didn't talk about mandala specifically, but that is just a symmetrical design, and you'll see it here that we're going to kind of create. The mandala is going to be based on a word that's going to repeat over and over so that every section has that radial symmetry that we talked about. The one that goes around all the way on its axis, no matter where you slice it, it's going to have symmetry. Again, our goal is I can use the elements of line and space effectively in the positive and negative space of an artwork to create a more interesting artwork. And so today, what I want you to do is start to think about a design that you want to do for your mandala, and I'll go back to this so you can look at it. Think of a word that you want to do or a design that you want to create, and try to decide on that. Tomorrow we'll kind of sketch them out, and then we'll be getting started on our project after that. So think of a word or kind of a design that you might like to do for your artwork, and that is all you need to do today. Nothing to submit after you finish taking notes and going through the lesson, and then we will see you tomorrow.